welcome to another Ginger Mathematician video. So I'm going to show you how you can learn chess in less than 30 seconds. So I'm going to try and summarize it for you, hopefully get a video less than 30 minutes and really go through the rules of chess. Before I get started, please like and please subscribe. It goes a long way for helping the channel grow. Right, let's get started. Okay, so what is the game of chess? So we have 64 squares on our board. You each have 16 pieces. Okay, so that's 8 pawns. You have 2 rooks, you have 2 knights, you have 2 bishops, a king and a queen, and both sides have an equal amount of material. White gets to go first, so can play a move first. So generally we consider that white has a slight advantage because they can play first. And the idea of this game is to capture the king. So get in a situation where the other opponent can't do anything apart from give up their king. Okay, so that's the key aim of the game. What we're going to do now is learn how each of these pieces, so the rook, the knight, the bishop, the queen, the king, and the pawn function. Before then we look at how that works in a game situation. Okay, so let's now look at these pieces individually. So let's start with the rook. Moves in straight lines. Are we ready to command it? Yes, we are. Let's get started. So the rook can move in a vertical direction and a horizontal direction as well. The easiest way to do this online is to just click on the piece and then click to the square that you want to go to. Notice you've got this sort of dark green around the outside telling you can go to this square. Boom. Okay, so you can do this in 2 steps. So we're going to go straight down, but we can also go straight across as well. Perfect. Yes, yes, yes. And we can do this, we want to try and do this in the fewest moves possible. So I want to go here first, then go here, and then go straight down. Nailed it. Okay, want to do this in the fewest amount of moves. So I am going to do which one first? I think I'm going to go down first, then across, then down, then up, and then a cross. Perfect. And so we can use 2 rooks now to help us do this. So can I turn the sound off? Sounds okay, isn't it? Right, let's carry on. So we're going to use this one to click this and this, and then use this one to go here and here. Super. And now for this one, we've got 2 rooks to speed up the process. So let's see what I can do with this rook first. I'm going to go here, 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 here. And then this rook can then finish up the other 2 squares. Excellent. So, fantastic. I've got the cool music and everything. Let's go on and see how the bishop works. Okay, and let's see how the bishop works. So this works on a diagonal basis, but notice if you've got a light square bishop, you can only go on light squares. Yeah? You can't move onto dark squares. So you can go in any direction, and it has to go diagonally, very similar to the rook, but just goes diagonally instead. So again, we're going to go to here, and go to here. And we're done. Perfect. Right, so for this one, we're going to take this route around so we can get as many stars as we can. And we're done. Perfect. So dark square bishop works in the same way. We're just going to stick to dark squares when we go around. So I'm just using this to move around diagonally. And we get only 2 out of 3. Probably a quicker way of doing that one. Okay, for this one, we are going to go this direction. May not be the quickest. It seems to do the job. Remember, these 2 bishops can work really, really well together. So if you've got 2 bishops, that can often be an advantage against bishop and knight. So we're going to use this one to take all the dark squares and use this one to take all the light squares. Perfect. Okay, and now we've got a combination of both. So let's then scoop up the dark squares. So we've got this one, this one, this one, and this one. Always dark squares. And so for this one, again, then move diagonally in any direction. I want to try and use the fewest amount of moves. And there we are. The cool music again. There we are. So now we're going to look at how the queen works. Okay, so let's look at the queen. So the queen works like a rook and a bishop together. So notice it can go this direction like a rook, but it can also go diagonally as well. The way we can see where the queen goes, if you just click on the piece, you can see all the different squares that it can go to. It's the most powerful piece, and that's why you only get one at the start of the game. So again, we're going to treat this like a rook, and now we're going to treat that like a bishop. And then we want to try and do this in the quickest route possible. So bishop, and rook. Super. And now this one, again, we start with anything we can take. So again, always look for this dark green around the outside. Tells you where you're allowed to go. And we go here, 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 and here. Perfect. Okay, this is a bit more tricky. Again, give yourself 10 seconds. See if you can find the most efficient route. Okay, so I'm not sure if there's the most efficient. This won't get you exactly to the end. Yep, so probably there was a better route there. But just get used to how the queen works. Again, it can go like a rook and go like a bishop. So, is this the quickest route? We're going to find out. I think it is. Super. I like a little bit of dancing. So good. We now know how the queen works. Now it's on to the king. So the king is an interesting piece. It's a piece that if you lose the king, it's game over. But it's also one of the weakest pieces. It can only move one in each direction. Notice it can go to any square, so diagonally, up, down, across, etc. But can only move one square at a time. So here, we're just going to take it one square at a time and then move to each of the squares. So it's a very good piece in the end game. In the start, it needs to be protected. Okay, so here we're going to scoop up these and then go back and scoop up those. Excellent. And now we know how the king works. Okay, and let's move on to probably the most tricky piece, which is the knight. It works in what we call an L shape. So you can see here, for example, it moves like an L. That's probably the best way to describe it. One thing to be aware of is if it starts on a light square, it can go then to a dark square only. So it flips between light square, dark square, light square, dark square, which can be useful when you're playing a game against another person. The way I like to think about it is it's 2 and 1 or 1 and 2. So here we go 2 along, 1 up, 1 along, 2 up. It always works in 1s and 2s. So here, 2 up, 1 across, 2 across, 1 down, 2 up, 1 across, 2 along, 1 down, 2 up, 1 across. And then the more you get used to doing these kind of puzzles, the easier that it gets. So then we want to start on either one of these squares. I think this one's the better one to do. And yeah, it helps you visualize exactly how the knight moves around. Notice the knight can't take any of these squares. So when it's in close quarters, actually it's quite a weak piece. But it can jump around, which gives it a lot of flexibility. So we are going to go around. Hopefully we can take everything. And we do. So just try and get some practice with the knight. Again, it works in that 2 down, 1 across, 2 across, 1 up, 2 across, 1 up, 2 down, 1 across. It's 2s and 1s. Just keep thinking it like 2s and 1s. And you have the right idea. I've got 1 star on that. It's probably a better route to find. So give yourself 10 seconds. See if you can find the most efficient route. Okay, so let's see if I can find that same route as well. That's the most efficient. Ooh, don't think I have, unfortunately. But it happens. Particularly when these two are next to each other, I'm going to have to do a lot of manoeuvring. But I do get the 1 star, so well done. Okay, now we're going to move on to the pawn. So the pawn works in kind of an interesting way. So to start with, when it's in the middle of the board, it can only move 1 square upwards. So it can keep moving 1 square upwards, but when it gets to the end, you can then promote to any piece that we've seen so far apart from the king. So a rook, a bishop, a king, or a knight. Now 99% of the time, You want to get a queen because it's one of the most powerful pieces, and a queen is fantastic to have against an opponent. And after this, it can go to any of these squares I've marked. We can get to the star, and we've got there. Sometimes it's more useful to actually promote to a knight. Why? Because if you want to get to these specific squares, this 1 down 2 across approach is actually really, really good. There we are, perfect. However, with a pawn, if you want to capture a piece or take a piece, which we'll look in the fundamental section next, then you always have to go diagonally. So it moves up 1, but when we want to capture something or take something, we have to move in a diagonal way, this way or this way. Perfect. So this time we want to capture and then promote. So remember, we can't capture this, but we can capture the piece, or star in this case, that's next to the pawn. So we can work our way upwards. We're going to promote to a queen, and then at this point we can take everything afterwards. Pawns are very weak at the beginning, but have a lot of potential. So we're going to take all these pawns, a bit like drafts, a bit like checkers. And after that, we can then take everything else. Perfect. Okay, this time we don't want to promote, we just want to take all the squares. So we're going to take this one and this one. This can take this. If I push this upwards, then I can take. If I push this upwards, then I can take. Outstanding, I agree. Okay, one thing to be aware of at the start of the game, so when it's on the second rank, either from the white side or the black side, the pawn can actually move 2 squares or 1 square. It has the choice. Okay, so that's something to be aware of. But once it's moved its 2 squares, then it can only move 1 upwards, or if there is a piece here, then you can capture to the side. Right, similar idea here. So I'm going to use this pawn to capture all these. Quite nice, we can capture 3 for 1. And then I'm going to use this pawn to capture this. And I'm going to use this pawn to capture this. And then use this to capture this. And we get a nice, neat row of pawns. Okay, so that's the fundamentals of chess pieces and how they work. Now what we're going to look at is how we use these in a real-life situation. So we're going to look at how to capture pieces first of all. So the way we do that is we click on our rook. Notice this rook can go, again, vertically and horizontally, and it can actually take anything on that row or column. So notice the pawn is on this particular column, so all I have to do is click on the capture piece and I can take it. Likewise, I just go onto the capture piece and can take it. Now notice, I would love to capture this pawn straight away, but the rook is defending this pawn, so order does matter here. I want to take the rook first, then the pawn is undefended by another piece, and then I can take the pawn. So we always have to think what is defended. Notice this pawn here is defended by the rook. If I take the pawn, the rook can take me. So I need to take this first, take the support to the pawn, and taking pieces first anyway is best, and then I can scoop up the pawn. Likewise, the bishop here is defending the knight is defending the pawn, so I need to sneak in my king and take the bishop first, then take the knight, and at this stage I can then take the pawns. Notice this pawn here is defended by this pawn, so the order does matter there. And again, we have to be careful here. So the queen is defending here, and the bishop's defending here. So I want to take the most expensive piece, the best piece first, then the next best piece, and then I can pick up the pawns afterwards. Okay, so now we're going on to protection. So it's kind of the opposite. So when you're defending, you need to think, are my pieces protected? If he tries to take me, I can take back. So notice in this situation, the bishop is attacking my rook. So if it's black's turn, he can actually just take my rook for free. I want to move it out the way so it's safe. If I move to this square, then the bishop here can actually take my rook. So this square is attacked, this is attacked, but this is not attacked. So I'm going to move my rook to safety. Likewise here, the queen acts like a rook and a bishop, so it's attacking all these squares that I'm using the arrow for. So I want to move my knight away from the attack of the queen. Notice this square is a safe square, so I can move away. Now sometimes your piece is trapped, as you can see, at the side of the board. The knight can't move to any of these squares because then the queen can take. So another option here is, can I defend the knight? So for example, if I move my rook to here, if the queen tries to take the knight, then I can take back, and then I'm a rook up here in this situation. So you always need to think, if I can't escape, can I defend the piece instead? So if I bring the rook to here, it'll then defend the knight. In this situation, this pawn is attacked, my bishop's attacked, but if I put my pawn onto a dark square, this bishop can then defend the pawn, like so. With this one here, sometimes it's not possible to either defend the piece, because if I move my bishop here, this bishop can then just take that. Sometimes it's not possible to run away. So another alternative option is you can actually block the attack. Notice if I put the pawn in the way, the bishop can't take that pawn because the knight will be then defending that square. Remember the L shape. So one other option that you have for protection is by blocking the attack that happens. With this one here, for example, I don't have to just block with a pawn. Notice if I put the knight away in front of the bishop, then it actually protects my rook here. Notice the bishop can't take it for free because then I can take back with the pawn, and it's an equal position. So sometimes you can block with pawns, which are defended, and sometimes you can block with pieces that are defended as well. For this situation here, we notice we've got two attacks going on. So we've got the queen attacking the knight, we've got the rook attacking the bishop. So is there a way I can defend both at the same time? Well, if I move my bishop to this square, I escape the attack of the rook, and at the same time, I defend my knight as well. Try and look for moves that do two or more things at the same time, like so. With this situation, the queen is attacking everything here, so it's attacking the knight, attacking the rook, attacking the bishop. So I need to think here, can I make a move that protects everything? Well, if I move my rook to here, it protects the bishop, and the bishop protects the knight. Everything is defended, like so. Okay, so that was protection. So what we're going to look at now is the combat. This is the fun part. So we need to know when to defend and when to attack. So with this situation, we're going to defend first. So we're going to move this pawn out of the way of the attack. Once that's safe, then we can go after this rook and then take it. In this situation, this pawn is under attack by both the bishop and the rook. So I'm going to defend it with this pawn, because then the pawn is defending diagonally. Once that is safe, I can't take this straight away because the rook is very, very sneaky and takes my bishop. So I'm going to move the bishop away, and now I'm safe and I can take that. And notice I can even just push this and then take the rook and promote at the same time, which is fantastic. Yeah, really, really good. In this situation, notice my queen is under attack by the rook. The knight is attacking this pawn here and this pawn here. How can I move the queen but also defend those as well? If I move to here, it will be defending both the pawns. At that point, I can then go on the attack, take the knight, and then take the rook. For this one here, notice this rook here is attacking the pawn, as well as the bishop as well. So I'm going to defend first. I can't take this straight away because it's defended by the bishop. So order matters. I take the bishop first and then take the rook. Okay, so give yourself 10 seconds on this one. How can I defend everything first and then go on the attack? Okay, if I move my bishop to this square, it defends this pawn, and this pawn. And then my knight is ready to then attack all the pieces. So I move here first. Now notice I don't want to move here because that would block this defense of the pawn. So I want to move here first. Get that queen, and then I'm going to move around finally get that rook. Love the music. Right, we're going to move on to something really important now, which is the check in one. So what does check mean, and what does that mean in terms of king safety? So whenever you attack the king, that is the most important piece on the board. If I take it, that's game over. So you'll notice when I move this to the square indicated, this will flash red and it says to black, you have to either move the king, block with something, or capture the piece that's actually causing that attack. So it's a really, really important thing to be aware of. So here I want to attack the king. It's a good thing to do. So where can this queen move? So it attacks the king, but not taken by the knight. Well, I can move all the way over here and work like a bishop. This one, I've got two possibilities of attacking the king. I can come to b5, I can come to that square, or I can come to g6. So I think, okay, which is better? Well, if I come to g6, this rook sneakily will take my piece. So this is the safer check. Excellent. This one here, don't forget that pawns can also check as well. So if I move my pawn to here, I'm actually attacking the king indirectly, aren't I, by actually attacking diagonally. So this can also be played. With this one here, I want to think, how can the knight check the king? Well, by clicking on the piece, I can see where it can go. And there are two squares possible. I can come to here with this L-shape attack here, or I can come to this square with this L-shape attack here. But if I come to this square, the queen can take, so this is my safer square to check. With this problem here, there is nowhere the queen can go down here where it can check and be safe, because notice this knight is protecting these two squares with the L shape. But I can come to this square and check because the king can't take, because the rook takes the king and it's game over. So this is one of the most effective checks you can do when it's supported by another piece. Excellent. And the last thing I want to look at here is what we call the discovered check. So notice if the knight moves out the way anywhere, it releases this queen attack on the king. This is what we like to call a disco, a discovered check. And Maurice Ashley put this term together. Notice if I move the knight anywhere, I've then got this attack. Okay, so now we're going to look at the other way round. So when we're under attack, how can we defend? Get out of check. So the easiest way is just to move out the way. So with this one here, for example, I can move to any square the queen can't attack. The queen can't attack this square, so I move out the way. With this one, for example, I check all the squares. So the queen attacks all those squares, the bishop attacks this square, the knight attacks this square and this square. The queen also attacks this square indirectly. So this is the only square here I can move and be safe. This one here, notice the king can't actually go anywhere. It can't go to here, here or here because the rook is defending all those squares. It can't go to here or here because this rook is attacking those squares. But again, I can block a check, so I can bring my rook and save the day and block like that. Perfect. With this case here, I can't actually go to a safe square. The knight covers these two squares. The bishop's attacking this square, but I can always take the piece that's causing the check. So I can take this piece and then my king is no longer in check. With this one here, my king can't escape. I can't take with the pawn because that releases the queen. But again, I can take this piece, but I need to find a different way of taking it. So I just take it with the knight. With this one here, I've got a knight check. Notice the pawn can't take the knight because it releases this rook attack. So I need to find an escape square, and there is one on this square. No piece is attacking here, so I can move. And my last one here, again, with a check, just like any threat, so to speak, or any capture, I can block. So I can put my knight in the way, and if bishop takes knight, then the pawn takes back, and I am safe. Okay, and the last part, which is the bit you've been looking forward to, is actually forcing checkmate, a situation where you make a check and the king can't get out of it. So the most common kind of mate or checkmate is when the queen gets close to the king here and it's supported by another piece. So notice if the queen comes to this square, like so, the king can't take back because the bishop then takes the king and it's game over. This is what's known as scholar's mate. So my queen goes here and it's checkmate. Another common checkmate is when the king is trapped in the corner, then a knight check and there's no escape square can also cause checkmate because there's nowhere for the king to go and the piece can't be taken. This is now known as the lawnmower checkmate. So notice the queen covers all these squares. If I bring my rook right to the edge here, it covers all these squares. And notice the king can't go anywhere and there's no way of blocking. That is also a very nice checkmate. With this one here, the queen and the knight work very, very well together. So the queen is covering a lot of escape squares. This square, this square, this square, and this square. Notice the king's only got two squares here, this square and this square. But the knight can come to this square here, and that covers these two squares. That's known as a checkmate. Perfect. And for this one here, you can also do what's called a discovered checkmate. So the knight is covering this square here. The rook is covering all these squares here. Let me try and do that again. All these squares here. So if I take the pawn here, it unleashes the bishop check and the king can't block or get out of it. Another checkmate. This one here. Notice the rook here is a pin to protection of the king. So the rook can't move. So if I take this with the bishop, the rook can't take back because then it releases a checkmate and that's not allowed. So I can take the bishop, the rook can't take back, and then the king has no escape squares to go. Notice this square would be covered by the bishop attacking sort of indirectly. So I can take there. And the last problem, again, if it's possible, try and get your queen in too close to the king, protected by another piece. If the queen was to come to this square here, which is allowed to do, then the knight is protecting the queen and there are no escape squares for the king. Notice that this square would be indirectly attacked by the queen coming into this square here. And we have a checkmate. Right, that is the fundamentals of how chess works, how the pieces move, and then some of the tactics that go on with the chess board. So, hope you enjoyed the video, and I think it's interesting. Hopefully I kept that to less than 30 minutes. I think I'm pretty close to it. And if you've got any questions, then please let me know. All right, bye-bye for now.